All right, ready to dive deep into type 1 diabetes. And I mean really deep, not just the usual stuff everyone skims over.
Yeah, we're talking immune system gone haywire, the tech that's changing the game for folks, and what it's actually like to live with this condition every single day.
You might know someone with type 1, or maybe you've heard the basics, but this isn't that. We're going deep, and expert speaker is here to guide us. So most people think diabetes and it's all about sugary drinks and such, but type 1, that's a whole different story, right?
Absolutely. It's not a lifestyle thing, it's autoimmune. Think of it like your immune system, your own bodyguard suddenly turning against you. That's type 1 in a nutshell.
Whoa, a serious inside job.
Yeah.
So the body's basically attacking itself, intense, but why would it do that?
It's like the immune system gets its wires crossed, see? In type 1, it mistakes the cells that make insulin, those beta cells in your pancreas, as the enemy and launches a full-on attack. Total case of mistaken identity, but with some really big consequences.
Okay, insulin. Most people kind of know it's got something to do with sugar, right? But what's it actually doing in there?
Picture insulin like a key. It unlocks the doors to your body's cells, so glucose, the energy we get from food, can get in and fuel everything up. No insulin, no entry. Glucose builds up in the bloodstream, and that's when problems start.
So like insulin is the VIP pass to the energy party, and in type 1, that pass gets revoked.
Exactly. And to make matters worse, the body completely stops making insulin altogether, like the factory shuts down. Big difference from type 2, where there's still some insulin, just not working right.
Two very different scenarios then.
Yeah.
But sticking with type 1, so we've got this crucial hormone, insulin, and the body decides to sabotage its own production. What causes that to happen in the first place?
$1 million question, and honestly, we're still figuring it out. It's a bit of a medical mystery, but we know it's not just one thing. It's genetics, environment, and the immune system itself all mixed up.
A real head scratcher for the medical detectives out there. Let's start with genetics then. If your parent has type 1, does that mean you're guaranteed to get it too?
Not a guarantee, no. It's not like some other conditions that are a direct inheritance. You might be more likely to develop it, but it's not a sure thing. Think of it like this. The genes might load the gun, but something in the environment often pulls the trigger.
Okay, so that brings us to suspect number 2, environment. What kind of environmental things are we talking about here?
This is where it gets interesting. Research suggests that being exposed to certain viruses when you're an infant, like some of those enteroviruses, could actually increase the risk of developing type 1 later on.
Wait, viruses? So a childhood illness could be linked to this. That's wild.
Really shows you how interconnected our bodies and the world around us really are. And it's not just viruses either. There's some evidence that even early exposure to something like cow's milk protein could be a factor.
Hold on, cow's milk. That's a new one. What's the connection there?
Still being researched, but some scientists think certain proteins in cow's milk might actually trigger an immune response in some babies who are already genetically predisposed to type 1. Like, the immune system gets confused and attacks those beta cells as if they were something dangerous.
Wow, so even something as common as cow's milk could play a role. That's incredible. And probably a bit worrying for parents who are just trying to do right by their kids.
It's definitely complex. We've still got a lot to learn, but this whole interplay between our genes and environment, that's key to understanding how type 1 gets started.
All right, so we've got the genetics angle, we've got the environmental puzzle. But you said the immune system itself is a factor too, right? We already talked about it attacking those insulin-producing cells. But what makes it go off the rails like that to begin with?
That's the heart of the autoimmune mystery, and unfortunately, we don't have a straightforward answer just yet. What we do know is that for reasons we don't fully get, the immune system starts seeing those beta cells as a threat, like it's got everything mixed up and launches a full-blown attack on something essential for survival.
It's like your own immune system hallucinating an enemy that's not really there.
Exactly. Case of mistaken identity with some potentially life-changing consequences. And what makes it even trickier is that this attack can be silent for a while, sometimes even months or years, before any symptoms show up.
Which I imagine makes early detection absolutely crucial. Speaking of which, let's talk symptoms. What should people be on the lookout for? I'm guessing it's a bit more than just feeling thirsty, right?
You're right. Excessive thirst and peeing a lot, those are common signs. That's the body trying to flush out all that extra glucose we talked about. But there are others that are less obvious.
Okay, like what? Give us the inside scoop.
Well, keep an eye out for things like losing weight without trying, feeling tired all the time, even with enough sleep, blurry vision, always feeling hungry even after eating. Even mood swings or being irritable can be a sign.
Wow, those are all over the place. Someone might not even think to connect those to diabetes,
Hmm.
easy to brush it off as stress or something else entirely.
Exactly. That's why it's so important to know the full range of what to look for and to see a doctor if anything seems off, especially if it's a few of these things together. Catching it early is key to preventing the really serious complications.
Speaking of which, you mentioned something earlier, diabetic ketoacidosis, or DKA. Sounds pretty intense. What's going on there?
DKA, that's a serious one, potentially life-threatening even, and it can happen when the body just doesn't have enough insulin. Remember how we said insulin is like the key for glucose to get into cells for energy? Well, no key, no energy, and the body goes into emergency mode.
Uh-oh. And what happens in emergency mode?
The body starts breaking down fat for energy instead, which creates these byproducts called ketones. Problem is, ketones are acidic, they build up in the bloodstream, and that makes the blood dangerously acidic too, hence the acidosis part of the name.
And that's really bad news, right?
Very bad, yeah. Life-threatening if it's not treated. Actually, DKA is often how type 1 gets diagnosed in the first place because the symptoms are usually severe enough that you can't ignore them.
So what kind of symptoms are we talking about with DKA?
Think nausea, vomiting, pain in your abdomen, breathing really fast, even your breath might smell fruity. Some people even get confused or pass out entirely. It's a full-on medical emergency.
Okay, that's definitely good info to have. Knowing about DKA really highlights how crucial the whole daily management thing is for someone with type 1. So what does that look like? How do you keep it in check?
Managing type 1, it's a lifelong commitment, that's for sure. But living a full and healthy life with it is absolutely doable with the right approach. It's got a few main parts: insulin therapy, keeping tabs on your blood sugar, diet, and exercise.
Okay, that's a decent amount to unpack. Let's start with the insulin therapy part. What does that involve?
Well, since in type 1, the body's not making its own insulin, the main goal of treatment is replacing what's missing. That's where insulin therapy comes in. Taking insulin regularly, either through injections or with an insulin pump.
So it's like manually giving the body that VIP pass it needs, right? Those cells can finally unlock and get the energy they need.
Exactly. And there are actually different types of insulin, each with its own way of working, how quickly it kicks in, how long it lasts, and all that.
So like a whole menu of insulin options to choose from.
You could say that. You've got some that are rapid acting, start working super fast, usually taken before meals to handle those blood sugar spikes after you eat. Then there are longer acting ones that give a more steady baseline level of insulin throughout the day.
Okay, so different insulins for different purposes makes sense.
Hmm.
But how does the insulin actually get delivered? You mentioned injections and pumps earlier.
Traditionally, injections have been the most common way to do it, using syringes, pens, or even these jet injectors, basically getting the insulin under the skin a few times a day.
I imagine that can be a lot to keep up with, especially for someone newly diagnosed.
It definitely takes some getting used to, for sure. But there are lots of resources and support out there to help people adapt. And in recent years, insulin pumps have become more popular. They're more automated. A small device you wear that continuously delivers insulin through a tiny tube under your skin.
So that takes some of the guesswork and the constant injections out of it.
Exactly. You can program pumps to give different amounts of insulin throughout the day, kind of mimicking how a healthy pancreas would do it naturally.
Pretty high-tech stuff.
Yeah.
What about the blood sugar monitoring then? Where does that fit into the picture?
Oh, that's absolutely crucial for folks with type 1. Lets them keep track of their glucose levels throughout the day and adjust their insulin doses if they need to.
So staying in tune with what your body needs at any given moment and adapting as you go.
You got it. The most common way to monitor is with a blood glucose meter. Prick your finger, get a tiny drop of blood, put it on a test strip, and the meter gives you a reading.
I've seen those. They've gotten a lot smaller and less noticeable than they used to be.
Definitely. And for people who want even more constant monitoring, there are continuous glucose monitors, or CGMs.
CGMs. Tell me more. Those sound pretty cutting edge.
They are. It's a tiny sensor that goes under your skin, constantly measuring the glucose in the fluid around your cells. Then it sends all that data wirelessly to a receiver, could be a separate device or even your phone. So you're getting real-time feedback all day long.
Wow, that's incredible. Talk about technology making a real difference. That's got to be a game changer for managing this thing.
It really can be. CGMs, they give you amazing insights into your glucose patterns, tell you if it's going too high or too low so you can do something about it before it becomes a problem, like having a co-pilot for your diabetes.
Okay, so we've got the insulin therapy covered. both injections and those pumps. And we talked about why blood sugar monitoring is so important. What about the lifestyle stuff you mentioned, like diet and exercise? Are those just as key as the medical side of things?
Absolutely, it's all connected. With diet, it's not about following some crazy restrictive diabetic diet. It's more about making healthy choices and being aware of how many carbs you're eating.
Because carbs are what really spike your blood sugar, right?
Exactly. People with type 1 have to be mindful of how many carbs are in their meals and snacks so they can match their insulin to that. Finding that balance is key.
Sounds like there's some serious calculation involved.
There's some math, yeah, but
Yeah.
it gets easier over time, especially if you've got a good registered dietitian or a certified diabetes educator helping you out. They can work with you to make a meal plan that actually fits your life and what you like to eat. And then there's exercise. That plays a big part in managing blood sugar, too.
So it's not just about the insulin and food, but how much you're moving your body factors in as well.
That's right. Exercise usually lowers blood sugar, so people with type 1 might need to adjust their insulin or what they're eating before, during, or after being active so their blood sugar doesn't dip too low.
It's amazing how interconnected everything is. Makes you appreciate how complex our bodies are.
It really does. And while managing type 1 definitely takes some effort and paying attention, it's important to remember it doesn't have to rule your life. With the right tools, the knowledge, and good support, people with type 1 can live full and active lives, go after their passions, achieve their goals, all of it.
That's a really important message. And speaking of tools and advancements, I hear there are even more medications out there beyond insulin that can help manage type 1 and those potential complications down the line. Let's dig into those, shall we? So beyond insulin, what other medications are we talking about here? It's like a whole arsenal you're describing.
Yeah, there's a good amount, and it's always evolving, which is exciting. One you might have heard of is pramlintide. It's an injectable, works alongside insulin, especially after meals.
Okay, a partner in crime for the insulin then. How's it work? Make the insulin more effective or something?
It's more like pramlintide tackles the problem from a different angle. Think of it as a traffic controller for your digestion. Slows down how fast your body absorbs glucose from food so you don't get those rapid blood sugar spikes after eating.
Putting speed bumps on the sugar rush. I like it.
Exactly. Plus, it also helps by suppressing glucagon, which is basically insulin's opposite, the one that raises blood sugar.
Oh, wow. So it's a two-for-one deal. Slows the sugar coming in and keeps the backup sugar in check. Are there any other medications in this arsenal you mentioned?
There's a class of oral meds called SGLT2 inhibitors. Now, they're mostly used for type 2, but they're showing some promise for type 1 folks too.
Interesting. Pulling double duty in the diabetes world then.
Yeah.
How do these SGLT2 inhibitors work? What's their deal?
Imagine them like little bouncers in your kidneys. They see excess glucose in the bloodstream and they're like, nope, you're out of here, and escort it out through your urine, helps lower blood sugar overall.
So they turn your kidneys into sugar filters. That's pretty wild.
It's a pretty neat approach for sure. But important to note, with SGLT2 inhibitors in type 1, you got to be careful. Slightly higher risk of that DKA we talked about, so close monitoring is key.
Right. DKA is not something to mess around with. Okay, so we've got pramlintide, our traffic controller, and the SGLT2 inhibitors, the bouncers in the kidneys. Anything else we should have on our radar?
Well, because type 1 folks are at higher risk for some complications down the line, like kidney disease or cardiovascular problems, they might be prescribed medications to address those specifically.
Makes sense, like a preventative measure, staying one step ahead.
Exactly. So medications like ACE inhibitors and ARBs, those are often used to help protect kidney function, which is important for everyone, but even more so when you've got diabetes in the mix.
Can't live without those kidneys. And what about heart health? You mentioned something about meds for that too.
Right, statins are pretty common. They help lower cholesterol, which in turn reduces the risk of heart attacks and strokes.
So managing all those risk factors, protecting those vital organs.
Exactly. It's about a holistic view, not just managing blood sugar day to day, but looking at the long-term health and well-being of the person living with type 1.
I like that. Not just surviving with type 1, but thriving. Now, you mentioned earlier about always having new advancements on the horizon. What's got you most excited in the world of type 1 research? What's making waves these days?
One of the most exciting areas right now is the research into artificial pancreases. Remember us talking about insulin pumps and CGMs? Well, an artificial pancreas basically combines both of those into one closed-loop system.
Whoa, a closed-loop system. That sounds seriously futuristic. How does that even work?
It's like having a super high-tech team working around the clock to manage your blood sugar. The CGM is always checking your glucose levels, sending that info straight to the insulin pump. Then, the pump automatically adjusts your insulin dose in real time based on what you need at that moment.
So it's like having a personal, automated insulin delivery system, adapting to your body all day long. That's incredible. Does that mean no more finger pricks and injections for people?
We're not quite there yet, but it's getting us closer, for sure. Artificial pancreas tech is still being developed and fine-tuned, but the early results are really promising.
That's incredible. A potential game changer. What other cool breakthroughs are happening in the research world? Anything else you're particularly hopeful about?
There's some really fascinating research being done on immunotherapies. The idea is to use them to actually prevent or delay type 1 from developing in people who are at high risk. Remember how we talked about the immune system going after those beta cells? Immunotherapies aim to retrain the immune system so it doesn't attack those cells in the first place.
So instead of just replacing the missing insulin, we're talking about stopping the problem before it even starts. That's amazing. What kind of immunotherapies are looking promising?
One approach they're looking at is using monoclonal antibodies. Basically, these are lab-made antibodies, and they target specific parts of the immune system, those rogue immune cells that are causing the trouble. It's about calming down that immune response and protecting those precious insulin-producing cells.
Wow, to think we might be on the verge of actually preventing type 1. What other avenues are scientists exploring? Any other outside-the-box ideas in the works?
Stem cell research is creating a real buzz, too. The idea there is to use stem cells, which can basically turn into any type of cell in the body, to actually create brand new beta cells, those insulin-producing powerhouses.
So you're talking about building a whole new insulin factory from scratch. Are scientists actually able to do that?
It's still early days in the research, but there have been some exciting breakthroughs. Scientists have managed to make insulin-producing cells from stem cells in the lab, and now they're working on ways to transplant those cells safely and effectively into people with type 1.
Now that is incredible. Sounds like something out of science fiction. It's amazing to see how far we've come in such a short time. What about right now, though? Are there any other innovations or cool tech gadgets that are making a difference for people with type 1? Any apps or devices we should have on our radar?
Oh, absolutely. Technology is playing a huge role in making diabetes management way more convenient and personalized. One big one is the rise of smartphone apps that work with those CGMs and insulin pumps we talked about. You can see your blood sugar readings, track your insulin doses, even get alerts and reminders all right there in your pocket.
Like having a personal diabetes assistant with you 24/7.
Exactly. And a lot of these apps are using fancy algorithms and artificial intelligence now to analyze your data and give you personalized recommendations and insights.
Now, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
It's like having a diabetes coach in your pocket, nudging you in the right direction all day long. What other cool tech is out there? Anything making a splash in the type 1 community?
There are these smart insulin pens now. They keep track of your doses automatically, even remind you if you forget one. And even for folks who use the traditional finger prick meters, there are some now that can beam your readings straight to your smartphone, so keeping track of everything is a lot easier.
Wow, pretty amazing stuff. It seems like the future of diabetes management is all about seamless connectivity and data tailored just for you.
It really is, and I think that's one of the most encouraging things about all this. The more we learn about type 1 and embrace these incredible technologies, the closer we get to a future where it's not just something people have to manage, but something they can truly live with without it holding them back.
That's a beautiful thought. So much hope and possibility out there. It's clear that with the right tools, the support, and a whole lot of personal strength, people with type 1 can live truly full and meaningful lives. It's incredible to see how technology and research are transforming what's possible for people with type 1 diabetes.
It really is. This is an exciting time, and it underscores how managing type 1 is a real team effort. It often involves medication, lifestyle changes, close monitoring, all while benefiting from cutting-edge tech and a whole lot of personal resilience.
And speaking of resilience, it's important to remember that living with a chronic condition like this can have its own unique challenges.
Absolutely. It's not always easy. There's a lot to juggle, both physically and emotionally.
What are some of those challenges that people with type 1 often face? And what kind of resources or support systems are out there to help them navigate it all?
Well, I think one of the toughest things can be just how relentless it can feel. Managing type 1 is a 247 a job, and it can be really draining mentally and emotionally to always be thinking about blood sugar, insulin, food, all of it.
It's like having this invisible illness that demands constant attention.
Exactly. And that takes a toll. It's not uncommon for people to experience burnout or what's called diabetes distress, that feeling of just being overwhelmed, emotionally exhausted by all the demands of managing the condition.
It's totally understandable. So, what can someone do if they are feeling burned out, overwhelmed? Where can they turn for support?
That's where those support systems we talked about are so important. Connecting with other people who truly get it, who understand what you're going through, can make a huge difference.
Finding your tribe, those people who just get it.
Exactly. There are online support groups, diabetes organizations, even local meetups. These are all places where people with type 1 can connect, share their experiences, offer each other support and encouragement.
It's like that saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. It's about knowing you're not alone in this journey.
I love that. And beyond peer support, there are mental health professionals who specialize in working with people with chronic illnesses. They can teach coping strategies, address that diabetes distress we talked about, and really help people develop a healthy mindset around their condition.
So important because managing your mental health is just as crucial as the physical stuff.
Couldn't agree more. And we can't forget about the importance of family and friends, those close relationships. Having that strong support system in your personal life makes a world of difference.
Sometimes you just need someone to listen, to understand, to be there for you.
Exactly. It takes a village, right,
Yeah.
to manage any chronic illness, and type 1 is no exception.
Well said. As we're starting to wrap up this deep dive, I think it's important to leave our listeners with a sense of hope and a feeling of empowerment.
Completely agree. Yes, type 1 diabetes is complex. It needs lifelong management, but it doesn't have to define you. With the right tools, knowledge, and support, you can live a full, vibrant, and meaningful life.
You can achieve those dreams, travel, pursue your passions, all while managing this condition.
Exactly. And never underestimate the power of research and innovation. We've made incredible strides, and the future is even brighter with new treatments, technologies, maybe even a cure someday.
Now that is a powerful thought. A future without type 1. Something to be hopeful for. As we close out this deep dive, I want to thank you, expert speaker, for sharing your expertise and insights with us today. It's been amazing.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And to our listeners, we hope this deep dive has left you feeling informed, empowered, and inspired to learn more about type 1 diabetes. Remember, knowledge is power, and the more you know, the better equipped you are to advocate for yourself, for your loved ones, and for a future where type 1 is no longer a barrier to a full and meaningful life.
Beautifully said.
That's all for this episode of The Deep Dive. Until next time, happy exploring, everyone.